I'm here with Erica Brescia, who is COO and co-founder of BitNami. And Erica, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Great to see you.
I hope you had an entertaining evening, and obviously keen to get your take on what you see as some of the key dynamics in the industry. I know you've been following some of the platforms like obviously Microsoft with Azure and what's been going on there, and their entry into the market this year has been quite significant. So give us a little bit of a sense of what you think is important.
Sure. So I think it's still, incredibly early. It's so easy to get caught up in all the exciting things that are going on in cloud. But when we look at what's really happening and where people are, it's still very early in the cloud adoption life cycle still. We do 1 million deployments a month, and 80% are still local, even though most people think of us as a cloud company already. And I think what we're seeing is a few key providers really gaining momentum and moving ahead of the pack. I mean, Amazon, obviously everybody knows, is continuing to innovate, and they're not letting up. They're continuing to push forward, and they have almost a startup mentality in terms of how quickly they're iterating and on how many fronts they're building out. We also see Microsoft has really grown by leaps and bounds. They're still far behind. I don't think that that's a secret, but they have the brain power and the developer adoption to really be successful in this market, and we've already seen a good amount of adoption there, probably more so than we would have predicted a year or so ago if you would have asked me about them. Same thing with GCE. It's still early, but there's a lot of anticipation of their platform and how focused it is on performance, and we think they have a real shot. There are other companies in the space where I think a lot of people are assuming that they're building big developer and user bases, and we haven't really seen that. Could be that our audience is self-selecting, but we do have a pretty broad audience, and we're just not seeing the adoption on other platforms. We see, a handful of providers really garnering most of the market.
So it's interesting you talk about Microsoft and Amazon. So obviously Amazon's kind of the de facto platform that everybody looks to today as a standard. But if you look at the number of .NET developers out there, it's a phenomenal audience. So do you think that group is going to take to Azure, or have they potentially already moved past that and started to use these newer platforms?
It's a great question. I think it remains to be seen, though. I will tell you, we don't currently support .NET deployments, so I'm coming from a bit of a biased perspective.
Sure.
From what I've seen, people, if you're developing on .NET, a lot of people are actually starting over and building on top of other platforms. I haven't heard a lot, and we do have a lot of relationships in the space, even if we don't support that. And we haven't seen a lot of those types of deployments yet. I actually think what they're doing with their infrastructure as a service offering and supporting Linux is...
It's very progressive.
Exactly, and I think it holds a lot of promise and will actually attract a lot more developers.
So let's look ahead for a moment. What do you think are some of the key things that need to get addressed in the coming year for the cloud to really take the next step?
I think one thing is the models by which ISVs are enabled to offer their software on different platforms. One of the challenges right now is that ISVs have a certain method and structure for selling their software, certain pricing models, certain usage patterns that don't necessarily translate extremely well to the cloud, and there's still a bit of a gap between how the cloud providers want to offer and sell software on top of their platforms through their marketplaces and what makes sense for the software vendors. I think over time those things will come together, but right now we see a big divide, and I think that's going to be one of the challenges that a lot of the cloud providers and us will be working to address, is making it easier for software vendors to provide their software on top of cloud platforms. Because at the end of the day, you don't want a platform, you want an application.
Right, exactly.
And that's a really key problem that I think has to be solved to enable the next wave of cloud adoption.
That's great. So what can we look to from BitNami in this coming year?
We're really focused on building out the App Store for server software. So as you might know, we offer a lot of open source applications currently. We're already signing agreements with all of the major application providers to provide their applications on top of BitNami, which means that they can offer native deployments as well as support for all the major cloud platforms in kind of one fell swoop. One of the interesting things I think about what we do is we can enable a very smooth transition from a local behind the firewall deployment to the cloud, and we hope to help people
That's significant.
move their local deployments to the cloud. So that's really where we're going to be focused.
That's great. Well, it's a great agenda, and I wish you luck with that, and hope to
Thank
see you
you.
again next year.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming this evening.
Thanks, Michael.
Great.